Good afternoon and welcome. Today on the Positive Psychology Hour, we have Rabbi Deborah Orenstein, who's going to be talking to us about hope.
Thank you, Caroline. Months ago, when we were talking about my returning to the Positive Psychology Hour, we picked randomly this date of Election Day, and I suggested, given the dysfunction and division in our government, that hope would be a good topic. Little did I know how much despair there would be in the world and how much we would be in need of hope, how distant hope might seem. So congratulations that you showed up today to get a little more hope. I want to say that that in itself is a hopeful sign. And we're just going to begin with 3 deep breaths and the intention of settling and supporting ourselves in these difficult times. Please breathe in deeply for support. We all have different sources of support, family, friends. And when you breathe out stress. For your second deep breath, breathe in spaciousness. Notice how your belly and your rib cage expand. Your chest lifts. And when you breathe out any constriction. Let your muscles go slack. And if you're not breathing in and out at the pace that I'm talking, just do it at your own pace. Some more shallow breaths in between or taking longer for your deep breaths. And a final deep breath. Breathe in your blessings. Even the worst day has a best moment. Breathe in, what is your blessing? What have you received? And then breathe out blessings. To whom do you wish to send love, support, strength? Take a final deep breath mindfully in and out. Shalom. Well, welcome everyone. I want to begin with something a little bit interactive and I hope something a little bit fun because we could all use a somewhat engaging and uplifting way of getting into our topic today. I'm going to show you in just a second the request to please share in the chat how you could become spectacularly hopeless. So I call this the Diva of Despair exercise. I just made it up not too long ago. And really get into it. I invite you to think about how you would breathe. We were just breathing, how you would hold your body, what behaviors you would do or not do, how you might communicate to yourself and your self-talk to other people, what you would consume in the way of food and media, anything at all. If you really wanted to be hopeless, how could you achieve it? This could also include what would you make sure not to do. So I see watching the news 24/7. That is definitely a good way to go down the rabbit hole. Focus only on the negative and be consumed by unhealthy habits. Yes, lack of self-care will not help any situation. Remain isolated. Don't reach out. Don't allow others into your sphere to comfort you. Eat too much sugar, don't exercise, don't get out into nature or outdoors. Wow, getting a cancer diagnosis. So happens that my mom just got a cancer diagnosis. So getting the diagnosis is not within your ken to control, but focusing only on that perhaps, or focusing only on the diagnosis and not on the prognosis or the next steps. Forgetting who's around us, neglecting support, sitting in the negative thoughts. It's one thing to have it. It's another thing to really soak in it, curl into a ball, not to, oh, that's some diva stuff. I like it. I appreciate that drama. So many other good ideas. Now, what I would like to point out here is, of course, this is a way of reverse engineering how we would have hope. That when we look at these do nots or avoids, we can see some things that would be important to take care of. Reach out, consider the good news, anticipate the good as well as the bad. Don't allow yourself to get drained either by the way you eat or the way you sleep or the way you think or the way you self-isolate, etc. And this also hints a little bit at what we think of as the opposite of hope. Some people consider the opposite of hope to be despair, but it could also be apathy or exhaustion. And whatever it is for you is worth paying attention to. So I don't want to leave you sitting with the diva. So just consider, what's one action that you could take, not that you must take, but you could take if the diva should show up or overstay her welcome. And just considering that, I think, gives us a sense of agency, power, hope. I also want to stoke your hope by talking a little bit about how good hope is for us. It's important to be hopeful about any enterprise, including increasing our hope in the world. So having hope increases the likelihood that adults will achieve their goals regardless of other factors, even allowing for differences in socioeconomics and education and health and all sorts of other factors. Hopeful students do better in school, even accounting for other factors. And I love this one today. I had to share it. Citizens who are hopeful tend to vote more. There is a new study just came out from Oded Admoni-Lashem and his new book out, I think this week, called Hope Amidst Conflict. He looked at all sorts of data among Israelis and Palestinians and found that hope surpasses all other factors in predicting willingness to talk to neighbors and to negotiate for peace. Again, accounting for many other demographics, many other points of view, whether somebody comes from one party or another, one district or another, one socioeconomic class or another, hope surpasses all these other factors. Hope fuels social justice work. And I like to give this very concrete example that hopeful people are more likely to recycle. That's not the only thing that you can do for social justice, but it is a small and specific example. Hope improves health, wellness, and athletic performance. In other words, it will help those who are doing well do even better. And it also helps for coping skills for illness and loss, for example, with that cancer diagnosis. Hope aids with psychological adjustment and problem solving. Obviously, if you don't think there's any hope for an answer, you're unmotivated to move forward. And hope is a strong predictor of other positive emotions like happiness, and it reduces depression and anxiety. So if you thought hope was just something nice or sweet or a little bit of window dressing that religious people like to put on top of politics, no. Hope is vital for creating a better future. It's actually the fuel that helps us create a better future. Now, in longitudinal studies, we see this in a very extreme and specific way. People who have been studied, including for diseases, who register in assessments as being more hopeful, can live between 2 and 3 times longer, accounting for all sorts of other factors, as less hopeful peers. So 2 people with the same disease, with similar prognoses, with similar treatment plans, one is hopeful, one is not. The one who is hopeful is likely to live up to 3 times longer. This is based on longitudinal studies at the University of Texas. So we say keep hope alive, but it's also true that hope literally keeps us alive. Now, I wanted to begin by sharing a theory of hope that you may have heard before on this Positive Psychology Hour. Dan Tomasulo has been a returning teacher, as have I. And I love his hierarchy of hope because it brings together a lot of hope research that had been done before him in a kind of a handy-dandy paradigm. He talks about that hope usually starts with negativity and uncertainty. Something is displeasing, something is destabilizing, and that leads to hope. If everything were perfect, there would be no need for hope. Now, sometimes positive psychologists say that hope is the only emotion that begins in negativity or uncertainty. I disagree with that. I think that sometimes gratitude begins in negativity and uncertainty. All you have to do is visit a hospice to see that. People are supremely grateful because of the negativity and the uncertainty of their condition. Sometimes awe can be very negative in its genesis. You see destruction of a hurricane or a tornado and you are awestruck. It leads to a sense of compassion, a sense of expansiveness, maybe even connection to a creator, but it starts in negativity. Next, you consider your resources. This doesn't necessarily happen in lockstep sequence, but often, once you get your bearings after a negative or uncertain situation, you will consider what is at my disposal. What do I have that I can use right now to address this circumstance? So I'm going to ask you now to think about an issue in your life that raises negativity or uncertainty. Pick any issue that first comes to mind. We all have a lot to choose from. It could be something very personal or global, something large or small. And then consider, what resources do you have at your disposal already? Your resources could be past experiences that you draw on, some expertise that you have, money, friendships, people you have on speed dial who could help you, family, friends, nature itself, connecting. Yeah. Your very own breath can be a resource we saw at the beginning for calm relaxation in the face of negativity or uncertainty. Dancing, community, love it. Siblings, support groups for a specific issue. Yes, so good to rely on and relate to people who are going through what you're going through, being able to help them and have them help you. Exhilarating exercise. Now, oftentimes we will say that you can't throw money at a problem, and that's true for many problems, but sometimes your resource does include funds. That if you can buy some help, some time, some expertise, some equipment, it may make all the difference in the world. Money is a resource, time is a resource, friendships, social capital, so much more. So after what you already have and counting that and corralling that, you may realize there are things you don't have. You need to reach out for support that is currently lacking for you. And that's very valid to do. This is a long tradition in Judaism that we rely on one another. I picture here a sukkah because on Sukkot, we invite in for spiritual visitation some of our ancestors. The support that you get usually is from the living, but you can even borrow hope, get support from ancestors, from mentors of the past whose wisdom you lean on, from texts, sacred traditions, and rituals. So after you have corralled what is immediately within your ken and reached out for support, the next level that Tomasulo talks about is perspective. You want to get a kind of a balance on this problem, not to exaggerate it, not to catastrophize based on it, but to consider it in its full perspective. And perspective might lead you to realize that it's endemic, it's systemic. It might lead you to realize it's smaller or larger than you thought, but right sizing whatever has led to the need for hope is important. Now, there's an old Yiddish expression that I love, Oibs is geschehen, is Meglach. if it happened, it's possible. So sometimes we look back on our past to gain perspective. I'd like to ask you to share at least one occasion in your past when things worked out well, despite significant obstacles or worries or fears. When I was much younger, I was about to announce my engagement to a man, and just beforehand, he called me up and told me the engagement was off. He had made a terrible mistake. He never loved me. It was over. And you can imagine in the time that was so devastating. And yet I look back on that now as one of the lucky near misses of my life. I wouldn't have met my husband. I wouldn't have my children. My life worked out, I think, so much better than if that engagement had worked out. So we all have those occasions when we can look back and say something was just hopeless to me at the time, but I see in the perspective of time that it worked out. So you may have an example like that or something else. Sometimes people will say this about all sorts of things, jobs, homes that they were about to buy and fell through, and wasn't it lucky? Valley says that getting fired enabled her to become more entrepreneurial and to find her own way and to do her own thing. There's so many times when things that seem bad actually expand us, and perspective like that can give us a lot of hope. Because even at the time, even though it was years before I would yet meet my current husband, my only husband, I still had a sense that I had been expanded, that my faith grew because of that experience. So one thing to think about, if whether it's going out on your own for a job or thinking about your relationship, how does that past occasion, when something went wrong and you overcame it, provide resources or perspective to you now? Does it make you more willing to take a risk? Does it give you confidence? Does it help you by recalling what personal strengths you drew on then that you might be able to draw on now? So just to complete this hierarchy, Tomasello talks about recalibration and risk. We can ask, what are my current resources? What else do I need? But we also always have to be asking, what do I need to change? We might have an initial approach to a negative situation or an uncertain situation and just stay stuck in it. But recalibration means we can learn to be flexible and say, this worked for a while, I need to try something else. Risk means assessing the risk, both of action and of inaction. What do you want to do about what has occurred? Now, the main source for Dan Tomasello and anybody else researching hope is Rick Snyder. And Rick Snyder said that hope really consists of goals plus pathways. A place you want to get to where you exercise your agency to get there, and a sense that there is a way to get there from here. Both of those things are important. So you're not just focusing on the end goal you want to see, but what are the various possible paths for getting there? Because no doubt there will be obstacles on some or all of those paths. You'll need to recalibrate and gain perspective and get support. This pyramid doesn't just work in one direction. But as you keep going through these steps, eventually, when you have your goals and you see some possible pathways, you get to a state of high hope. And what high hope means is that now you ask a new question: what is possible? And you can start to imagine things that you couldn't have begun to imagine in that first place of negativity and uncertainty, when you were hit with that disequilibrium of a new difficult circumstance or awareness. So here's a hopeful thought. If you're asking what is possible, that is a form of uncertainty. When we think about hope, we tend to think about uncertainty as the villain. But uncertainty is also the source of everything new and exciting. And so I see these pyramids as one stacked upon the other. When you get to high hope, you're uncertain. What's next? What's possible? That's a new form of uncertainty. And from there, you can gather your resources, get your support, gain your perspective, recalibrate, pay attention to your goals and pathways, and reach another level where you're wondering again, what's next? What's possible? So I introduced this because I think it's a great map and a great checklist. If you're going through something difficult and you're overwhelmed, you might deliberately try to go through these stages one by one from the bottom to the top. You might also ask yourself, what's missing? If I'm feeling hopeless about a certain circumstance, is it that I haven't reached out for support? Is it that I'm stuck in my last vision of what was going to happen and I need to recalibrate? Maybe it's that there's a lack of acceptance of negativity and uncertainty. That's the biggest part of the pyramid. That's the foundation, after all. If I didn't allow myself to read that reality and to feel that pain and to grieve that circumstance, maybe none of the rest will be balanced and stay stable. Maybe I need to go back and just feel my feelings about the negativity and the uncertainty. These are all possibilities. Now, I want to share with you that when I read about Rick Snyder's research, Dan Tomasulo's research, Shane Lopez's research, it occurred to me that what Dan Tomasulo calls the unified theory of hope is what I would call half of hope. To me, there are two types of hope. The first is exactly what we've been talking about, the hope of agency, the hope that I can impact the negative circumstance in some way, not completely, not all the time, but I always have a next step. And then, because I'm a rabbi and I sit with people when they don't have a lot of control, when they have that cancer diagnosis that may be dire, when they're in hospice, I'm attentive to another kind of hope. I call it the hope of acceptance. The hope of agency says there is a power within me to change things. Again, not all the time, not completely, but I can have some influence. The power of acceptance says there is a power greater than I. So when it seems possible for me to take action, when I don't feel utterly felled and stuck, I can exercise the hope of agency. And even in a hospice, people talk about having wishes, dreams, hope of agency there too. What are your goals in the time you have left? But there are also times in life, and after a mass shooting, at the start of the war, with certain kinds of political news, certain kinds of mourning that people go through right after a diagnosis, when there isn't the strength to do those things. And all we can have, I think, at that point is the hope of acceptance, which is no small thing. I came to solidify this idea when, during the pandemic, I asked my Hebrew school students to draw a picture of hope. And I love to share this picture with you. This was from a fourth grader at the time. He took an existing drawing and personalized it. You can see the t-shirt, if you look carefully, says "Go Mets," because he was a Mets fan. And the caption reads, "My vision of hope includes more people helping the elderly and the pandemic ending." More people helping the elderly is something that is definitely within our agency to do. This young man and anybody else who is able-bodied can open a door for the elderly, can do it with a smile, as the boy is doing in the cartoon, can wait patiently, can make a connection. That's all within the hope of agency. But if we didn't know before that we lack control, I think we all found it out during the pandemic. And there are times when there is nothing that you or I, or even Anthony Fauci or anybody else could do. At the beginning of the pandemic, there were no vaccines. We weren't sure about masking. We were wiping down our groceries. We all felt so threatened. There, we really had to rely on the hope of acceptance, this sense that the world is a friendly place, the body heals. There is a power greater than I invested in survival and healing. So the hope of agency works toward particular cherished ends. That's why goals are on that hierarchy. The hope of acceptance expresses a more global faith that a good future will unfold. And that is equally important and supportive. It's expressed in a famous verse from Ecclesiastes that says, "For to him that is joined with all the living there is hope," or still anyone selected out for life has hope. In other words, hope doesn't reside in a particular goal, but hope is part of life itself. As long as there is life, there is hope. So hope as trust and faith, the Hebrew word there was bitachon, means hope in a better future, hope in a friendly universe. I put this slide to show the night sky because I think when we look up, very often we don't just feel a sense of awe at the stars, but a sense of hope that there is this great force working in the world, whether you regard that as creator or whether you regard that as the amazing development of our universe. There is something so much greater than we are that seems to have been creating and surviving and promoting survival for us. And so the hope can be in God. As a religious person, I certainly put my hope in God, but you can also hope in destiny. You can hope in family. You can hope in love or in peoplehood or in any other great and positive power or value that surpasses oneself. So I'd like to ask everybody to now share in the chat a power greater than yourself that motivates you, that gives you a sense of hope. Right now, these days, with all that's going on in Israel, I'll share that the unity of the Jewish people gives me hope. The fact that Jews are coming together to support one another, even Jews who were in great disagreement, division, is a hopeful sign, I think. Love it. Nancy says generations to come. We don't only have to look back for perspective, we could look forward for perspective. That's a traditional Jewish midrash, a story about the stories in the Bible that says the guarantors for us receiving the Torah were not Abraham or Moses or any of the prophets. The guarantors were our children, future descendants. Compassion, love, mercy, and grace of Jesus. So a lovely Christian putting one's hope in a power greater, community, love, compassion. So notice compassion can be a power greater than oneself, whether it's attached to Jesus or God, or just the value and feeling and humanity of compassion. Images of ancient space from the Webb telescope. Beautiful. Animals, nature. And just as a review, what we're saying is that for hope to be true, we need some kind of imperfection, which is to say we need the human condition. Because uncertainty, negativity, challenges, disasters will happen. Also, hope can arise out of good circumstances. We've all been to a baby naming or a wedding where we had a tremendous sense of hope, not because anything was wrong, because we were looking, as was said, to future generations. There has to be a vision, something better that can unfold. Agency is a component of hope, and Rabbi Jonathan Sacks writes about this extensively. He contrasts Judaism with ancient Greek philosophy. At the heart of Judaism is a belief so fundamental to Western civilization that we take it for granted, yet it is anything but self-evident. We are what we choose to be. Society is what we choose to make it. There was in Greek philosophy, we call it in English the three fates. We talk about a kind of a destiny. People don't really have choice in the end. The gods decide. Judaism stood against that with a very different vision that has now been integrated into Western ideas. And we have to not take it for granted. The idea that we have free will, that we can make a difference, is huge and important for agency. At the same time, I think it's very important that we not assign ourselves as God, that we not say we have the agency to do everything, but that we cultivate the hope of acceptance. We surrender, we have faith, we connect to something greater, and we trust in the power of the universe. Now, I'm sharing with you a quote on the screen from Jeremiah. This is the most searched Bible quote on Google. And it started to be the most searched Bible quote on Google during the pandemic. For I know the plans I have for you, declares Adonai, plans for your well-being and not for your harm, to give you a good future and hope. Latet lachem acharit v'tikva. Acharit is the word for future, but it means it will all come out well in the end. Now, I put a feather behind this quote in honor of Emily Dickinson. The thing without feathers that perches in the soul is hope. It is fragile as a feather, but also it sings continuously, even in the storms. Now, the question arises, is hope Jewish, culturally speaking? I've been talking a lot about hope, but don't we think of Jews as kvetchers or Jews as disaster mongers? Weren't the prophets constantly pessimistically predicting all sorts of terrible ends if the Israelite people would not repent? Yes, there is that side of things. I love a quote from Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, who said, Gewalt, it is forbidden to despair. Gewalt is a Yiddish expression difficult to translate. It means something like, heaven protect us. And so it's like an oy vey. Oy vey, it is forbidden to despair. Jews have both sides of that. We do have a sense of oy vey, and we have made the decision that it is forbidden to despair. Zechariah calls the Jewish people prisoners of hope. We are bound and determined to hope. Hope is the Jewish heritage in history, heroes, homeland, texts, prayers, holidays, theologies, practices, humor, and survival. Otherwise, not very relevant. In other words, in his book, David Arno shows how hope touches every aspect of Jewish life, including he talks and writes about Holocaust humor and how there was hope even then in the Holocaust. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks writes in his book, Future Tense, not all, but perhaps most of the commandments are either about creating hope individually or through networks of support, or about behaviorally inculcating habits of hope. So all the mitzvot are there, in his view, to send us toward hope. Hope is Jewish also in the Hebrew language. The main word in Hebrew for tikva, there are actually three or four ways to say hope, but the main word is tikva, which is related to the Hebrew word mikvah, ritual bath, because hope is a kind of a healing pool into which you lower yourself. It is restorative. It is transformative, like the ritual bath. And just like the waters of the ritual bath must be collected and contained, so too hope must be collected and contained. Sometimes the hope seems to leak right out of us, but the idea of container links ritual bath and hope. Hope is also related to the word rope in Hebrew. Sometimes we will say, I'm at the end of my rope. I can't go on. I have no hope. But hope is also something you grasp like a lifeline, like a rope. And in Joshua, in the story of the spies who come to the city of Jericho, there is a woman named Rachav who lets them in through a rope that is called a chevel. But then later, when they promise her that they will save her family during an invasion, the name of the word changes to tikva, tikvat shani, the crimson cord that they say will be tied. And when she ties that crimson cord to the window, her family will be saved. So hope is hanging on to the end of that rope. Here's another aspect of the etymology of hope in Hebrew that's important to hang on to. Hope has to do with expectation. The word tikva in its verbal form means both to wait and to hope. So I align that kind of waiting to the hope of a pregnant woman who is waiting expectantly for a birth. We even say she's expecting. Kaveh el Adonai means wait expectantly, wait and hope on God. Strengthen your heart and be of good courage. Yes, wait and hope for God. Kaveh el Adonai. So hope has this quality, not just of sitting back passively, but of a kind of a hope of acceptance that says there's a power greater than I, there's a goodness in the world, the arc bends towards justice. And so I have hope even as I wait for my circumstances to unravel. How have you, or how might you, stoke positive expectation for the issue that you began thinking about? Whatever you garnered support for and thought about resources for and gained perspective on, how could you stoke positive expectation for the issue that you're contemplating as we talk today? One way that I stoke hope is I look for what I call my hope heroes, people who are in dire circumstances and still doing work among Israelis and Palestinians who are leading dialogue on peace, for example. Give me a lot of hope right now. I pay attention to them. I watch their videos. I listen to their podcasts. What is it that you're doing to stoke your hope? Looking to the hostage families, that's what resilience and love and hope look like. Beautiful. Remembering that I've been through tough times before. I come from tough stock. I will make it through. So beautiful. These are some ways, looking back, looking forward, looking to heroes, immersing myself in God's eternal word. Beautiful. Hope through biblical texts. I think it gives a lot of people a lot of hope to read the Psalms and to see the range of emotions, not just hope, but also despair that turns to hope, and agony and worry and anger and a sense of being surrounded, and joy and gratitude, and seeing the humanity and the lasting legacy of all those emotions. Remembering the passing of my mother at age 100, who said, I still have so much to do. I've proven I'm stronger than I think. Looking for beauty in what is good, connecting to others, being kind, showing up in a way that I'm proud. Oh, beautiful. The Talmud says that you'll be asked just a few questions when you get to heaven. And one of them is, did you expect salvation? Were you looking forward to salvation? And about this, there's a beautiful teaching by Rabbi Eliezer Papo. He says it's not enough to say with one's mouth that one is anticipating redemption. Rather, it is necessary that a person expect redemption with a whole heart and total belief. Just as a person comes closer to death every day, so too does redemption come closer each day and every day. If it tarries, then we will wait, for it will come. Yes, surely, without any doubt. It is incumbent on every human being to be expectant. The salvation of God can happen in the blink of an eye. I love this quote because it really jumps off the page with its energy. To me, this stokes hope. This idea that it's up to you whether you will lean into your vision of whatever redemption looks like to you, whether we're talking about a messianic redemption or something much more small, the redemption of having a peaceful Thanksgiving dinner with my family, whatever it is, that you will look forward to it expectantly. And this also goes back to the hope of agency, that we work to bring redemption. We don't just sit around and hope it happens. We do whatever actions we can take, but also we have acceptance. We wait with great expectation for it. Wait like a woman who is waiting to birth her baby. I want to offer a few hopeful ideas and strategies that come from the Jewish tradition. One is from a modern Jewish philosopher, Franz Rosenzweig. In his teachings, he talked a lot about the eternal present. For example, the moment of Sinai didn't just happen once in the 13th century BCE in the desert with Moses and the people of Israel. It happens every time we are called to the Torah or open the book of a Torah and read from it. Every time we study, it's constantly being revealed to us. Torah is being given in the eternal now. But what's perhaps even more famous than his idea of the eternal now is his notion of not yet. When he was already quite elderly, someone asked him in a kind of a challenging manner, do you put on tefillin every day? These phylacteries that are on your screen, traditional thing for a Jew to do you put those on every day? As if, were he not to put them on, his philosophy would not be legitimate. And Rosenzweig's answer was, not yet. It's like the 100-year-old mom who says, I still have so much to do. That's very hopeful. Not yet. I'm in my 80s. I don't put them on yet, but I'm working on it. I will get there. It's one of my goals. So that idea of not yet, I think, is a beautiful way to maintain hope. Lamentations 3 takes it another degree from absolute despair to maybe. Sometimes you could feel afflicted by God's own hand. This is the dramatic, difficult language in Lamentations 3. My flesh is worn away, my bones are crushed, I'm ground into the dust. I'm made to dwell in darkness like those long dead. I'm cut off, walled in, pleading, prey to others, numb. I've become a laughingstock. I lost my strength and my hope. But then in the same chapter, but this I call to mind. I will therefore hope. Adonai's kindness has not ceased, nor has God's compassion ended. Looking in perspective, seeing it's not only the bad, there is some good. There is still divine kindness and compassion. Adonai is my portion, says my soul. Therefore, I will hope in God. This is the hope of acceptance, having nothing to do with results or qualities. Just I put my faith in something greater than myself. In this case, my soul is speaking to me about God. And then it is good to wait and hope patiently and quietly for the salvation of Adonai. That there is an internal resource that I have of patience and quiet and calm that I can cultivate. And that helps me. And this leads to the verse, Ulai yesh tikva. So maybe there is hope after all. So I'd like to think for a moment with you about where might you find room for not yet or maybe regarding the issue that remains negative or uncertain that you started with. Is there a not yet quality, something that hasn't materialized yet, a way you haven't managed to respond yet, but you can see it in the distance? Or can you allow for a maybe, just a possibility of something opening up that you had decided was a closed route? I'm going to close my remarks with a couple of the most famous teachings from Jewish tradition and see how we can apply them today. We don't just go from despair to maybe. or from despair to not yet. In the prophets, we go from despair to revival. In the famous prophecy of the dry bones, God says to Ezekiel, "Mortal man, can these bones live again?" And Ezekiel replies, "Adonai, my God, only you know." I love that answer. I love that answer for its humility and for its wisdom. If I look at those dry bones, even in this this artistic rendition, I would say, no way, not happening. But only you know. There are more possibilities than we allow for. And then God says, these bones are the whole house of Israel. I think there's a message in that too. We don't have to go it alone. So, how might the humility of uncertainty help you with your issue? And how might community help you with your issue? As you think about that source of negativity or uncertainty that you started with. Just going to give a moment for that to sink in and for people to consider. Now, this is the source of a quote we don't know so well. Our bones are dried up, our hope is lost, we are doomed. The people of Israel are so dead that they can't speak. They're this valley of dry bones, but God speaks for them. God says, the people are saying. God can translate and describe what these skeletons are saying. Our bones are dried up, our hope is lost, we are doomed. And that becomes the source for part of Israel's national anthem. Od lo avda tikvatenu. From avda tikvatenu, our hope is lost, to od lo avda tikvatenu. Our hope is not yet lost, or it's still not lost. Based on a poem that then became Israel's national anthem. So we go literally from dead to revived. That is the power of hope. I want to consider where on the hierarchy you might find hope of agency for Israel right now. I certainly think about the support that Israel has garnered, despite all the criticism, despite what many people see as unfair, double standards, selective outrage, etc. Israel has garnered a lot of support. On whom or what do you rely for your hope of acceptance about Israel? Jewish peoplehood, the holiness of the land itself, God. Ben-Gurion famously said, in Israel, in order to be a realist, you have to believe in miracles. I want to encourage everybody to borrow hope if you don't have your own. Look to some hope heroes, whether it's the families of hostages, as someone mentioned, or anyone else. And I'm going to close with the famous quotation from Isaiah, "Youths may faint and tire, young men will surely stumble, but those who hope in and wait on God will renew strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not tire. They will walk and not faint." I like to point out that we have here a kind of a strange order. You would think that first you don't faint, then you walk, then you run, then you soar on wings. But we have the opposite order, I think, for a reason, to send the message that if you are waiting and hoping and you feel drained, then you have two available choices. One is to switch, yachalifu, trade strength with someone else, renew your strength. Regard this as a relay race in which you can hand off and get handed the hope that you need. And secondly, all you have to do is not faint. And then eventually you'll be able to walk and then run and then soar. So my closing question is, what is the next step on your journey? How will you not faint? How will you walk? How will you run? How will you soar?
Wow. Thank you so much. I'm learning like a new skill. You had asked earlier how it's a new computer system, right? And I'm learning a skill, and how that is, it's helping me to feel brave. It's something I didn't feel like I could do. And I wonder if you talk about that, if hope comes when you're overcoming a challenge and there's some bravery there.
Yes, I think absolutely. That is key to the hope of agency, I think, the sense that you can track and notice that when you step up to a challenge and you try something, you can measure its success. And you can also congratulate yourself for the effort, even when it isn't specifically successful or not successful yet, because you're taking action, you're figuring it out, you're recalibrating, you're on your way. It always feels better. I think action is so often the cure for hopelessness, the cure for anxiety. So many negative emotions are assisted and ameliorated by taking action, just being in action and challenging oneself and expanding oneself gives a lot of hope.
Beautiful.
I always think that it's so important, to strike the right balance, because it's so easy with what they call the negative bias of humanity. So I thank you for, especially for pointing out possibility. But I also think that there are two sides to every coin, and that we do need to look at the light and the shadow. It's all part of our full humanity. So we have to keep that also in mind, that you, as you had said, you do need to feel your feelings. Again, seeing the light and the dark in your life, you can also, of course, learn from the shadow. You can learn from the light, and you can also learn from the shadow. So I think it's important to see both. But uh, I need to be reminded, because of negative bias about possibility, which you said today. And it's funny, because I just happened to be switching channels, and I don't know how he came up, but Henry Winkler was talking to Seal, the black singer, and Henry Winkler said throughout his life he let two things be his guide, and I thought this was interesting: tenacity and gratitude. And
Hmm.
a tenacity, sort of waiting and expecting, and waiting. So tenacity and gratitude are two ways to also, two pathways to go. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And there's a big, sometimes people think of hope as a kind of a glossing over the negative, or just let's pretend everything's fine, or I wish it would be better. A lot of hope researchers make a point of saying that's not genuine hope. That's not authentic hope. That hope is not rainbows and unicorns. Hope is looking at what is difficult and addressing it, not shying away from seeing the shadow, as you said. Thank you for that.
I've used a lack of hope sometimes in my thinking that it would be a hedge against disappointment. And it never really worked, because when the disappointment came, if I was going to be disappointed, I'd be disappointed anyway. But I viewed quelling my hope as a way of managing potential disappointment.
Yes. I hear that, and I think that you're not alone in that. There's a Christian preacher who says she used to have the opinion, never hope for anything and you'll never be disappointed. And first of all, I think you're right that that's not true, because the human heart hopes. So you may not say it aloud, you may not admit it, you may not invest in it, you may not put it on Facebook because you don't want to be embarrassed later if it doesn't work out, but you are hoping. And then the second piece is, I think that more people have regrets over the things they didn't invest in and didn't try for, whether or not they worked out, than have regrets for the things they did. And so it's really about avoiding avoidance when it comes down to it. Figuring out a way to kind of be living full out And that's dangerous and it's scary. And we all retreat from it sometimes. But that's why I love that Yachalifu verb in Isaiah's quote. It's not just that they will renew strength, they will exchange strength with one another. When one person feels it's too dangerous, I can't, I dare not hope, somebody else can come in and bolster you. And I want to say, Rick Snyder talks a lot about borrowing hope from other people, from ancestors, from descendants, from experts. And I would just say, Patty, as your once and in my heart forever rabbi, you can always borrow hope from me.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. You bring tears to my eyes just seeing your beautiful face. Brings hope.
Thank you.
I am now currently reading Edith Eger's book called The Gift, and she refers frequently to Viktor Frankl and choosing hope. She was in the camps, and she survived, and she talks about overcoming and the efforts and the actions and keeping the hope going. And I needed that in my life very much now, and you really have supported and reinforced that. And one of the things you said that was extremely important to me about making the effort. Because even if you said if it's not successful, you took the action, you made the effort. And you have no regrets about that, and something will come from that, something really meaningful and substantial. And I'm just focusing on that when I was writing down notes you said.
That how do we deal with hoping and disappointment then in the results? So if you're looking at the action triangle, the hope of agency triangle, I think what happens is these triangles build on themselves. If you have a disappointment, that's negativity and uncertainty. You say, oh, I tried something, it didn't work. I'm really disappointed. Now, what are my resources? Where's my support? What's my perspective on that? How can I recalibrate? What are my goals? What are my paths to get there? And you climb again, this time wiser. So I think that in action, there is that opportunity to go back and rebuild. But the beauty of the hope of acceptance is that there really can be, in my experience, no disappointment. You make your hope bigger than your pain, and you return to what you truly believe in and count on in this world, whether it's love, whether it's compassion, whether it's the Jewish people, whether it's God, whether it's family, some or all of those things, or something else for you. So I wish that for everybody, and I thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you, Rabbi Deborah.
Shalom.
Shalom.